leaseholding, or at least or freeholders, as the may, of course, name may be, it goes all the way back to the beginning of the feudal system. Back in the ye olden days, if you wanted to be rich, the best way to do that was to own land. The only way you could do that, of course, is if you were part of the nobility. It was the only way you could do that. However, over time, this started to change. You had the growing power of cities. And then, of course, you had merchants within those cities who started to demand rights. And this was a big social change that took place over like that medieval period, up into the Renaissance, all the way even now into today, you could almost argue. But we are seeing the case now of freehold, of these leaseholds, shall we say, get it properly, use the correct parlance. These leasehold systems are now set to be abolished. It is something that has needed to be really taken hold of and really gotten around. And Labour are now looking at ways at how they can do that. Because just at the end of the last Parliament, Michael Gove rushed through, and I mean really rushed through, this plan to abolish leasehold. However, it was so rushed through and ill thought and ill conceived that a leaseholder could veto. Let's say they owned a building and these residents wanted to get rid of of this leaseholder stuff. They would gain the right to just go, don't think so. Meaning they still keep their control over that building. Like, it went very unremarked because of everything of else that happened on at that time. But that whole bill was a mess. It had more holes in it than Swiss cheese. But we are now seeing, of course, Labour wanting to tackle this and get their sort of version in this and have a look at how they can sort of fix, shall we say, a lot of those holes, or plug at least a lot of them that, as we just mentioned, are in the case of some of this stuff. So we're going to go over this stuff because I think it is interesting to talk about, and it is something that a long really needs to come to an end in this. So, before we go on and to talk about this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So, let's crack on then into this. So, centuries-old leasehold systems to be abolished in England and Wales. So, the Housing Minister has promised now to abolish the centuries-old leasehold system in England and Wales before the end of this Parliament, as the government now takes its next steps towards an outright ban on new leasehold developments, which again, well, I think will be very, very much welcomed once that comes in, because that will be a big start on that, to be sure. Matthew Pennycook, who said he was now committed to ending this feudal-era system, which applies to 5 million homes in England, after years of complaints from leaseholders about crippling service charges and crumbling buildings. And this is the main thing. There has been countless stories about people who buy a house that are just leaseholders in this case. And then they literally suddenly find themselves having to pay out all these extra charges for services they don't even actually receive. Anyway, while some leaseholders have been complaining about, of course, the slow pace of action by this government, ministers on Monday will lay out a series of proposals to make it easier now for homeowners to jointly own the buildings that they live in. The Common Hold White Paper will form now the basis now of draft leasehold reform for bill later this year that is likely to include now a ban on developers selling new flats under this controversial system. Pennycook said that if I had to said to any leaseholder 5 or 10 years ago that in a single parliament the government is going to bring this system to an end, I think any of them would have said that that is incredibly ambitious, incredibly radical. Well, we'll get it done. If we have lasting generational impact in overhauling a system which is feudal in right, freehold was used all the way back in the Doomsday Book, you know. The concept of leasing goes back to serfs being able to work a plot of land. This agreement has been in place for centuries and is essentially, in some ways, unchanged. It is landowners, so it is land owned by someone else who now grants the right of use of that land to another person. That is why it is incredibly unfair. That is why, in many ways, leaseholders are now second-class homeowners. That's what we've got to change. And in many ways, he's right in that case. He is absolutely right. You have to change that. And there's a lot of stuff now where it looks like we're going to be seeing common hold ideas come in. This, like I say, once this white paper, like I say, it's been published today, no doubt we'll probably see more of this in the coming weeks. We'll get probably a chance to talk about, depending, what else I know. The whole Ukraine situation at the moment is pretty much dominated my stuff. There's a ton of stuff I wanted to talk about that I haven't been able to have a chance to do or respond to because of this stuff. So yeah, it is good to see that they are doing this. So of course, Pennycook is of course not the first minister to actually promise to abolish leasehold. Michael Gove, of course, the previous housing secretary, also planned measures under the last government, but his reforms were watered down after Downing Street intervened. And yeah, that was and should be very, very much noted that Gove wanted to actually go through this. But number 10 constantly intervened and said, no, we can't do that. The donors might be upset. So all this stuff got very, very much watered down. MPs are, of course, now increasingly complaining about the behavior of some freeholders and even building managers who they accuse now of leveling fees for services that do not exist or even failing to make repairs, which they have now charged. Leasehold reform campaigners have hoped that Labour's election win would, of course, increase the pace of change. But some have been very disappointed in how long it is now taking to publish a draft bill and to enact some of the reforms that Gove passed. Gove's leasehold reform bill passed at the very tail end of the last parliament after very intense negotiations between him and number 10. Several elements of that bill have, of course, not even been formally enacted. However, introducing including, of course, introducing a formula to decide how much residents should actually pay to buy out their lease. Some leasehold campaigners have accused the government of now soft pedaling their proposed reforms, but Pennycook now blames the very rushed nature of Gove's bill for those delays, saying a proposal, of course, to make it easier for leaseholders to manage their own properties, for example, was written in such a way that it could now have allowed building owners to vote on whatever should happen. That served as now a warning to what happens if you're going to rush things through and not ensure that the reforms are now watertight. So, we're going to try and balance doing these things as fast as possible, but also ensuring that we get everything right. That is the lasting benefit to leaseholders. On Monday, the white paper will, of course, include a number of suggestions to make it easier to run buildings under common hold, a form of ownership that allows flat owners to now own or even manage their buildings jointly. This will now include stricter rules on how common hold buildings can be run, designed to give more confidence to mortgage lenders, and that it will not fall into disrepair. The plans will now also include common holders now split their buildings into separate sections so that only they benefit now from certain amenities have to actually pay for them. Pennycook said that the wider now reforms is now necessary to bring this feudal revolving system now to its end entirely. And to an end, I mean that essentially common hold becomes the now default tenure going forward, and that we have a number of residential leasehold agreements. He also acknowledged why some leaseholders felt so dismayed at the pace of change, saying, "I understand entirely why leaseholders generally are frustrated. They have had a sort of consternation fatigue, We want to see these things enacted quickly because a lot of them are suffering in the hands, in many cases, of unscrupulous freeholders. And I think he's right. You've got to set a balance between rushing things and doing it right, because otherwise you get the example that was put there by what Gove tried to do, trying to rush through his bill. That essentially, a freeholder could just go, "No, not going to do it. No, vetoed." There was a lot of problems with that bill, a lot of problems. That I'm glad that they are tackling it, because it's something that really needs tackling, quite frankly. And it is, of course, one of the many things that are bundled together to create this housing crisis that we are tackling. So, like I say, we'll see what happens. We'll see eventually what happens with the bill, what's in the bill eventually. And we'll see, of course, it still hasn't been released yet, the white paper to be seen as well. So probably, maybe, depending on, other stuff that's going on as well, how that develops. So as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.